Oh, come in, dear, come in, find a comfortable seat. I've just put the kettle on. There's a bit of a chill in the air today, isn't there? Nothing a good cup of tea can't fix. 2 sugars for you, is that right? There we are. I was just stirring my tea this morning to sugars, just like always when I caught sight of my reflection in the spoon. Oh my, these old hands. They've held so much. And that's when I remembered the day everything changed. It wasn't just one thing, you see, but a string of moments that led me right to the edge of the life I thought I wanted. I was standing at a train station back in 1962, with just $17 in my pocket and a decision that would either save me or destroy me. It's funny how a whole lifetime can pivot on a single choice, isn't it? Back then, in our little seaside town, the world felt so much smaller. The days were measured by the tides and the church bells, and the nights were quiet, save for the lonely cry of the gulls. My life was simple, mapped out for me, or so I thought. I was 19, and I was in love. Or, at least, I was certain it was love. His name was Thomas. Thomas was a charmer. He had a smile that could coax the sun from behind the clouds and eyes the color of the sea on a summer's day. He worked down at the docks, his hands calloused from mending nets, but always so gentle when he took mine. We were inseparable. We'd spend our evenings walking along the old wooden pier, the salty air whipping at our faces, the scent of brine and fried dough hanging thick around us. We'd watch the fishing boats bob on the water as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was on that pier, under a sky full of stars, that he made his promises. A little cottage with a white picket fence, a garden full of roses, a life away from the prying eyes of our small town. He painted a beautiful picture, dear, a masterpiece of a future, and I was so eager to step right into it. My parents, bless their hearts, were not so taken with him. He has no prospects. Lily, my father would say, his brow furrowed with worry. A girl like you needs stability. Back in my day, you listened to your parents. Their words carried weight. But the heart of a 19-year-old girl is a stubborn thing, I thought their caution was just old-fashioned fussing. I believed our love was strong enough to build a foundation on, strong enough to withstand anything. We met in secret, which only added to the romance of it all. We'd find each other under the big weeping willow by the creek, its branches creating a little world just for us. The air would be cool, smelling of damp earth and wildflowers, and we'd whisper our dreams into the twilight. It felt like we were the only 2 people in the world. The trigger, the thing that set it all in motion, was a letter. Thomas got a letter from a cousin in America. It was full of tales of opportunity, of jobs and land, and a kind of freedom we could only dream of. That's when the idea took root. A new life, a grand adventure, just the 2 of us. He was so excited, his eyes shining brighter than ever. He started saving every penny he could, working extra shifts down at the docks. One evening, he showed me the tickets to one-way passages on a ship bound for New York. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was real. It was happening. We were leaving. I remember the feel of the crisp paper in my hands, the scent of the ink. It smelled like hope. It smelled like forever. But as the day of our departure grew closer, a strange sort of unease began to creep in, like a fog rolling in from the sea. It started with little things. A hushed conversation between my mother and a neighbor that stopped the moment I entered the room. A look of pity from Mrs. Gable at the bakery when I told her I'd be leaving soon. The town was small, and secrets, well, they had a way of seeping through the cracks. I tried to ignore it, to dismiss it as small-town gossip. But the feeling lingered, a cold knot in the pit of my stomach. I was standing on the precipice of a new life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to take a blind leap. What was it that everyone else seemed to know, but I didn't? The answer, I would soon find out, was more complicated than I ever could have imagined. The whispers started as just that faint murmurs, carried on the salty breeze like the distant clang of a buoy. I'd overhear snippets at the grocer's, a hushed word or 2 at the post office. They were about Thomas, about his family, things that didn't quite add up to the perfect picture he had painted for me. It's the father's debts. I heard old Mr. Abernathy mutter to his wife one afternoon. Like father, like son, I always say. I hurried past, my cheeks burning, pretending I hadn't heard, but the words stuck to me, like burrs on a woolen coat. I asked Thomas about it one evening. As we sat in our usual spot beneath the willow, I tried to sound casual, as if it were just a passing curiosity. Thomas, I said, someone mentioned your father. Something about money troubles. He stiffened, just for a moment, but his charming smile was quick to return. Oh, that, he said, with a wave of his hand, that's ancient history, Lily love, just bitter old folks with nothing better to do than dredge up the past. My father made a bad investment years ago. It's all sorted now. He squeezed my hand. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. We're looking forward, you and I, to America. I wanted to believe him. Oh, how I wanted to. I loved the way he said, in America. It sounded like a promise, a magic word that would solve everything. But the seed of doubt had been planted. I started to notice things I hadn't before. The way he would sometimes fall silent, a shadow passing over his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he was always a little too quick to change the subject if I asked about his family. The whispers grew bolder. It wasn't just about his father anymore. There were rumors about Thomas himself, that he was a gambler, that he owed money to some unsavory characters from the next town over. The talk was that our trip to America wasn't just a grand adventure. It was an escape. My mother tried to talk to me. She sat me down in the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of baked bread, and her worry. Lily, she began, her hands twisting a dish towel. Are you sure about this? Are you truly sure you know this boy? I reacted badly. I'm ashamed to say. I accused her of not wanting me to be happy, of trying to hold me back. I was a girl defending her dream, and I couldn't see that she was a mother trying to protect her child from a nightmare. The week before we were due to leave was agonizing. The excitement I'd felt had curdled into a constant, churning anxiety. The $17 I had painstakingly saved from my part-time job at the dressmaker's shop, which I'd planned to use for little luxuries on our journey, now felt like my only safety net in a world that was becoming increasingly unstable. The turning point came 2 days before our departure. I was walking home when I saw Thomas talking to two men I didn't recognize. They weren't from our town. They were dressed in city clothes, and they didn't look friendly. They had Thomas backed up against the wall of the pub, and though I couldn't hear their words, their posture, their menacing closeness, told a story all its own. Thomas looked scared, not the charming, confident boy I knew, but a frightened young man, cornered and out of his depth. When he saw me, his face went white. He quickly said something to the men, who gave me a long, cold look before turning and walking away. Who were they, Thomas? I asked, my voice trembling. No one, he said, too quickly, just some old acquaintances. Business. He tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. For the first time, his touch felt cold. The warmth I had always cherished was gone, replaced by a desperate chill. The lies were piling up, and they were becoming too heavy to ignore. The ship was set to sail in 2 days, but I felt like I was already lost at sea. The night before we were to leave, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, the only sound the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, counting down the seconds to a future I was no longer sure of. I kept seeing Thomas's face, the fear in his eyes when he was cornered by those men. The whispers, my mother's warnings, his evasions, it all swirled in my mind. A chaotic storm of doubt. I had to know the truth, not his version of it, but the real, unvarnished truth. So, in the pale light of dawn, while the rest of the town was still asleep, I made a decision. I put on my best dress, the one I had planned to travel in, and I walked not to the docks, but to the one person in town I knew would be honest with me, no matter how much it hurt. My father's sister, my Aunt Clara. Aunt Clara was a no-nonsense woman, a widow. She ran the town's small lending library and had a reputation for being sharp as a tack and brutally honest. She lived in a tiny cottage filled with books and the scent of lavender and old paper. She was surprised to see me so early, her spectacles perched on the end of her nose as she opened the door. Lily. Good heavens, child, what's wrong? I broke down. Right there on her doorstep, the tears I had been holding back finally came flooding out. I told her everything. The whispers, the men, the fear in my heart. She listened patiently, without interruption, guiding me inside to her small, cluttered living room. She made me a cup of strong, sweet tea, her hands steady and comforting. When I had finished, she sighed, a deep, weary sound. Oh, Lily, she said softly, I was afraid of this. And then she told me the story. The full story. Thomas's father hadn't just made a bad investment. He had gambled away his family's savings and cheated several local families out of their money. bringing shame and ruin upon them. And Thomas, it seemed, had inherited his father's weakness. He was deeply in debt to dangerous people. The trip to America wasn't a dream. It was a desperate flight. He wasn't taking me to a new life. He was running away from the consequences of his old one, and he was planning to use what little money I had to help him get there. Each word from my aunt was a stone, and with each stone, the beautiful glass house of my dreams shattered. The truth was ugly and cold, and it hurt more than I could have imagined. I felt like such a fool, so blind and naive. By the way, dear, where are you watching from? What time is it there? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. It does this old heart good to know who I'm sharing my tea with. Aunt Clara let me cry until I had no tears left. Then she put her hands on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. The boy you fell in love with, Lily, that part was real, but he is lost, and you cannot let him take you down with him. You are stronger than that. I left her cottage with a heavy heart but a clear mind. The storm inside me had passed, leaving behind a stark, quiet certainty. I walked to the train station, where I was supposed to meet Thomas to travel to the port city. My $17 were tucked safely in my purse. It felt like both the smallest and the largest sum of money in the world. He was there, waiting on the platform, a hopeful smile on his face when he saw me. That smile faltered when he saw my expression. Lily, what is it? We'll be late. I stood before him, the rumble of the approaching train, a drumbeat, marking the final moments of my old life. I know, Thomas, I said, my voice steady. I know everything. The color drained from his face. He started to stammer, to make excuses, but I held up my hand. There are no more words, Thomas, no more lies. I reached into my purse, but instead of pulling out my ticket, I pulled out the photograph of us from the pier, the one where we looked so young and full of hope. I looked at it one last time, then handed it to him. I wish you well, I said. I truly do, but I am not going with you. The train screeched to a halt beside us. He pleaded, he begged, he promised he would change. But I could see the desperation, the web of deceit he was trapped in. For the first time, I saw him not as my charming hero, but as a boy in need of saving, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was not the one who could save him. I couldn't even save myself if I stayed. Leaving him on that platform was the hardest thing I had ever done. I turned and walked away without looking back, my body moving on pure adrenaline, while my heart felt like a lead weight in my chest. I didn't take the train to the port. I took the one heading in the opposite direction, with no destination in mind. I just needed to be moving, to put distance between myself and the life that had almost been. The rhythmic clatter of the train on the tracks was the only sound that penetrated the fog in my mind. I watched the familiar countryside blur past the window, each field and farmhouse a reminder of the girl I had been only yesterday. That girl was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize yet, someone hollowed out by grief but held together by a fragile thread of resolve. I got off the train in a town a few hours away, a place where no one knew my name or my story. I found a small, clean boarding house for ladies, run by a stern-faced but kind woman who asked no questions. My $17 wouldn't last long, but it was a start. It was independence. Those first few weeks were terribly lonely. The silence in my small room was deafening. After a lifetime of living in a bustling family home, I'd lie awake at night, listening to the unfamiliar city sounds, and the tears would come. I mourned the future I had lost, the love I thought I had, but I also mourned the girl I had been, the one who had been so trusting, so naive. To survive, I had to work. I found a job as a seamstress in a small tailor's shop. The work was painstaking and my fingers were often sore, but there was a comfort in the repetitive motion of the needle, in the creation of something whole and new from pieces of fabric. It felt symbolic. I was slowly, stitch by stitch, trying to piece my own life back together. I wrote to my parents. Of course, I told them I was safe, that I needed some time. My mother's reply was tear-stained but full of love. My father, in his own gruff way, sent a little money, tucked inside a letter that simply said, "We are proud of you. Come home when you are ready." Their support was a lifeline, but I wasn't ready to go home. Not yet. Going back would mean facing the pitying looks, the whispers, the constant reminders of what had happened. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet, to prove to myself that I could. I learned to be frugal, to make a little go a long way. I discovered the simple pleasure of a walk in the park on a sunny afternoon, the joy of borrowing a book from the public library. I was learning to find happiness in small, quiet moments, rather than in grand, sweeping promises. One day, I received a letter from my Aunt Clara. It was short, but it contained a piece of news that made my heart ache with a strange mix of sadness and relief. Thomas had made it to America, but the men he owed money to had friends there, too. He was in some trouble, she wrote. He had sent a letter to his mother, full of regret. He had asked about me. I folded the letter and put it away. A chapter of my life was truly over. He was on his path, and I was on mine. There was no anger left, just a profound sense of sorrow for the boy who had gotten so lost. Slowly, the sharp edges of my grief began to soften. I was still lonely, but it was no longer a crushing weight. It was becoming a quiet space, a space where I could get to know myself. For the first time in my life, I was listening not to the promises of a boy or the expectations of my family, but to the sound of my own footsteps on the pavement. And I was beginning to like the direction they were taking me. After nearly a year away, I finally felt ready to go home. It wasn't a retreat, but a return. I was different now. The world hadn't broken me. If anything, I felt stronger, quieter, more myself. The town was the same, yet everything felt changed because I had changed. The whispers had died down, replaced by new gossip about someone else's misfortunes. My return was noted, of course, but after a few weeks, I was just Lily again, the girl who worked at the dressmaker's shop. Except, I didn't go back to the dressmaker's. I saw an opening for an assistant at my Aunt Clara's library, and I took it. Working in the library was like a balm to my soul. The quiet, the smell of old books, the gentle rustle of pages turning it was a peaceful world, a world of stories far removed from my own recent drama. It was there, among the shelves of history and poetry, that I met your granddad. His name was Arthur. He was a teacher at the local school, a kind, steady man, with warm eyes and a gentle smile. He was a widower. His wife had passed away from an illness a few years prior. He carried a quiet sadness with him, but it was a gentle sorrow, not a bitter one. He came into the library every Tuesday afternoon, looking for books on history and gardening. We started talking, first about books, then about other things. Our conversations were never rushed, never demanding. They were easy, comfortable. He had a way of listening, really listening, that made you feel seen. He wasn't charming like Thomas. He was genuine. He didn't make grand promises. He offered quiet companionship. He started walking me home from the library. We'd stroll through the town as dusk settled, our conversation a comfortable murmur against the evening quiet. He told me about his wife, about the love they had shared. He spoke of her with such tenderness and respect, and I knew this was a man who understood the value of a heart. One spring evening, he invited me to a concert in the church hall. It wasn't a grand date, just a simple outing. But as I sat beside him, listening to the music, I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the crowded room. It was a feeling of peace, of rightness. Our courtship, if you could call it that, was slow and gentle, like the turning of a season. It was built on shared cups of tea, long walks, and quiet conversations. He never pressed me about my past, but one day, sitting on a bench overlooking the sea, I told him everything about Thomas, the shame and the heartbreak. He listened without judgment. When I was finished, he simply took my hand. His was warm and strong. "You were very brave," he said, and in his eyes, I saw not pity, but admiration. He showed me a different kind of love, not the frantic, breathless passion of my youth, but something calmer, deeper, and far more enduring. It was a love that felt safe. It was a love that felt like coming home. He didn't try to erase my scars. He understood that they were part of who I was. He loved the person I had become because of them. He wasn't a hero swooping in to save me. He was a partner, walking beside me. The light he brought into my life wasn't a dazzling, blinding flash, but a steady, warm glow that promised to last, and I found myself, to my own surprise, beginning to believe in that promise. Marrying Arthur was the easiest decision I ever made. Our wedding was a small affair, held in the garden of my parents' home on a sunny afternoon in June. The air was filled with the scent of my mother's roses and the happy chatter of our closest friends and family. I wore a simple dress I had made myself, and in my hands, I carried not a bouquet of expensive flowers, but a small clutch of wildflowers Arthur had picked for me that morning. Life, with your granddad, was not a grand adventure in the way I had once imagined with Thomas. We didn't sail across the ocean to a new land. Instead, we built our new world right there, in our small town. We bought a little house with a garden, the very one I'm sitting in now. Arthur tilled the soil and planted vegetables, while I filled the flower beds with color. Our life wasn't about escaping the past, but about cultivating a beautiful present. It was a life woven from ordinary moments that, together, created an extraordinary tapestry. It was the comfort of his arm around me as we sat by the fire on a cold winter's night. It was the sound of his laughter as he tried to teach our children, your father and your aunt, how to fly a kite on the windy cliffs. It was the smell of the pipe tobacco he smoked after dinner, a scent that, to this day, means home to me. There were struggles, of course. Life is never without its challenges. We had financial worries, illnesses, and disagreements, just like any other family. But we faced them together, as a team. With Arthur, I learned that love isn't about never having problems. It's about knowing you have a partner who will hold your hand and walk through the storm with you. He encouraged me to follow my own dreams. When the head librarian position opened up after Aunt Clara retired, he was the one who insisted I apply for it. You can do it, Lily, he said. You know more about those books than anyone. And he was right. I got the job, and it brought me such a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Sometimes a thought of Thomas would cross my mind, a fleeting shadow. I heard through the grapevine that he had eventually straightened himself out, married, and had a family of his own. I hoped he had found peace. My feelings for him had long since faded, replaced by a quiet gratitude. The heartbreak he caused had inadvertently set me on a path that led me to Arthur, a path that led me to true happiness. My youthful mistake didn't have to be a life sentence. It was a lesson. The $17 I had kept from that day at the train station remained tucked away in my old jewelry box. For years, it was a symbol of my independence, of the moment I chose myself. But as the years with Arthur turned into decades, its meaning shifted. It was no longer just about the life I had run from, but about the life it had allowed me to find. It was the price of a painful but necessary truth, the down payment on a lifetime of genuine love. Our tapestry wasn't perfect. It had knots and frayed edges, signs of wear and tear, but it was ours, and it was beautiful. It was a life of shared joys, weathered sorrows, and a deep, abiding love that was as steady and reliable as the tides. Arthur has been gone for 10 years now. Oh, how I miss him. The silence in the house can be heavy some days, but it's not an empty silence. It's filled with memories, with the echo of his laughter and the warmth of the life we built together. This old house, every nook and cranny, holds a piece of our story. It all comes flooding back sometimes, triggered by the smallest things, like this morning, stirring my tea, seeing my old, wrinkled face reflected in the curve of the spoon, and I see her, the 19-year-old girl on the pier, so full of dreams and so terrified of making the wrong choice. I want to reach back through time and tell her, it's all right. Your heart will break, but it will heal, and it will be stronger and wiser for the breaking. You see, dear, the greatest lesson I learned is that we often have to lose the life we planned to find, the life that is waiting for us. I thought my world had ended that day at the train station. I thought I had lost my one chance at love and happiness. But what I had really lost was an illusion, and in its place, I found something real. Love isn't always a whirlwind romance or a dramatic escape. Sometimes, it's quiet, it's gentle, it's the steady presence of someone who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to stand by your side, day after day. It's building a life together not on grand promises, but on small, everyday acts of kindness, respect, and forgiveness. Bravery isn't always about grand, heroic gestures. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to say no, to walk away from a situation that you know in your gut is wrong, even if it's the hardest thing in the world. Trust that inner voice, dear. It rarely lies. Your own truth is the most reliable compass you will ever have, and don't be afraid of the detours. Don't be afraid of getting lost. Sometimes, the wrong path is the only thing that can lead you to the right one. The scars you collect along the way are not signs of damage, but marks of survival. They are a testament to your resilience, to your capacity to heal and to love again. I look at this photograph of me and Thomas, the one from the pier, and I no longer feel the sting of betrayal. I feel a sort of gentle compassion for those two young people who knew so little about life and even less about themselves. And I feel an immense gratitude for the journey that followed. A journey that led me through heartbreak and loneliness, to a quiet library, and into the arms of the kind, gentle man who became the love of my life, your granddad. So, when you look at your own reflection, dear, I hope you see the strength that lies within you. Life will present you with your own train station moments, your own difficult choices. Have the courage to choose yourself. Have the wisdom to know the difference between a fleeting fantasy and a love that will truly shelter you. And have the faith to believe that even after the deepest winter, spring will always, always come again.